When I first stepped into my new apartment, I never expected my life to become this interesting. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking in the small, simple space that I thought would be just fine for comfortable living. But the moment I opened the door to my room, I realized that things were about to get far from ordinary. My roommate, a fox-like girl with long golden ears, a soft fluffy tail, and big, shining eyes, looked at me and smiled. Her smile held a mischief that seemed to say she knew all the rules but preferred to bend them in her own way. "Hi, I'm your roommate and human rules don't really apply to me," she said softly, yet her voice carried a confidence that left me stunned. I chuckled and replied, "So this is the place where we live by our own rules?" She just tilted her head and flicked her ears back, her gaze sharp and curious, almost as if she could read my thoughts. Within minutes, I noticed the apartment changing subtly around her presence. She rearranged the scattered dishes on the kitchen counter, not out of obligation, but because she wanted them a certain way. She left small marks of her own, like tiny signatures claiming half of this space as hers. What surprised me most was how naturally she ignored human norms. Even after stepping out of the window to stretch her legs, she played with her tail and occasionally glanced at me with teasing, knowing looks. Her every move was free, instinctive, and unapologetic, like she could live entirely on her own terms. I thought, is it really possible for someone to be so unconventional and yet so captivating? But when she suddenly leaped onto my study desk and nudged a book with her tail, I felt my heart skip a beat. That's when I knew my life was never going to be the same again. By the end of the first day, it was clear. Having her as my roommate meant that every moment would now be an adventure. Her unpredictable behavior, playful mischief, and disregard for rules promised that ordinary life was officially over. The second day in the apartment started like any normal morning, or at least that's what I thought. I woke up, expecting a quiet, uneventful day. But as soon as I stepped out of my bedroom, I realized that my fox girl roommate had other plans. She was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, her tail swishing back and forth in a rhythm that seemed to command the space. "Morning," she said casually, but there was a sparkle in her eyes that made it clear she was plotting something. Before I could respond, she leaped up and darted around the apartment, inspecting everything as if it were some kind of challenge. I soon learned that living with her wasn't just about sharing space. It was about surviving her little tests. First, she pushed all the furniture slightly out of place. "Let's see if you notice," she said with a mischievous grin, clearly enjoying the subtle chaos she had created. I spent 10 minutes rearranging the couch and chairs, only for her to leap back in and flick her tail across the coffee table, sending my notebook sliding across the floor. Then came her favorite test, food. While I was making breakfast, she sat on the counter, watching every move. Every time I reached for a plate, she would swipe it gently with her paw-like hands, as if testing my patience. "Patience is important," she said, grinning like she knew a secret I didn't. And somehow, I realized she was teaching me more about her world than any words could explain. By mid-morning, it became clear that she enjoyed watching me react. She would suddenly appear behind me while I was reading, her ears twitching, her eyes wide and curious. Sometimes she would nudge objects off shelves, not out of malice but to see if I would notice, or perhaps just to amuse herself. I had to admit it was frustrating and fascinating at the same time. Despite her chaotic energy, there was a strange rhythm to it, a sense that she wasn't simply being difficult. Every little test, every playful interference, felt like she was teaching me something about flexibility, observation, and the way life could be more playful than I had imagined. By the end of the day, I found myself laughing at her antics more than I was annoyed. I even started leaving small traps of my own, books slightly out of place, pens arranged in funny patterns, just to see how she would respond. It was a game, and she was clearly a master player. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something important. Having her as a roommate meant more than sharing an apartment. It meant sharing an adventure, a constant stream of surprises, and lessons disguised as challenges. And deep down, I was looking forward to every single one of them. By the third day, it was obvious that my fox girl roommate wasn't just playful, she was a full-blown rule-breaker. And not the small harmless type. She had her own set of laws, and human norms didn't seem to matter one bit. I was sitting at the dining table, trying to focus on my work, when she suddenly hopped up onto the countertop. Her tail flicked lazily, knocking over a glass of water. "Oops," she said, flashing a cheeky smile, as if the spill was part of some grand experiment. I sighed, already realizing that "oops" in her vocabulary meant, watch what happens next. She didn't just ignore rules, she rewrote them. Electrical cords became her playground, papers her climbing walls. Even the ceiling fan seemed to entertain her as she jumped and twisted, testing the limits of gravity. Each movement was precise yet chaotic, like she had mastered a dance that humans couldn't understand. At first, I tried to correct her. "You really shouldn't be doing that," I said cautiously. She only cocked her head, ears twitching, and gave me that knowing look. It was as if she was saying, rules are optional. Fun is mandatory. Later, she decided to explore the balcony. I followed, worried she might fall. But instead of simple curiosity, she started rearranging the pots and small furniture like a general organizing her battlefield. "Why follow the old rules when you can make your own?" she asked, balancing effortlessly on the edge. Somehow, her confidence was contagious, and I realized I was smiling despite my worry. That evening, she dragged me into her world more directly. She had hidden a small obstacle course across the living room, pillows, chairs, and blankets forming a maze. "Let's see if you can follow my rules," she challenged. I hesitated, then laughed, realizing that this was her way of blending fun, chaos, and learning. Every jump I made, every careful step, was a test, but also a lesson in flexibility, observation, and letting go of rigid thinking. By the time the night came, I wasn't frustrated anymore. Instead, I was fascinated. Living with her was like stepping into a parallel universe where the rules weren't just ignored, they were reinvented. My once quiet apartment had become a stage, and she was the star performer, effortlessly blending mischief and charm. As I lay in bed, I reflected on the day. Every rule she bent or broke taught me something unexpected. Patience, humor, creativity, and above all, the freedom to think beyond limitations. Her presence was no longer just entertaining, it was transformative. I realized that my life had shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated, and deep down, I couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. By the fourth day, the chaos had settled into a strange kind of rhythm. My fox girl roommate was still unpredictable, still bending rules at every opportunity, but now I could anticipate some of her quirks, and she seemed to enjoy testing me even more because of it. That morning, I found her lounging on the sofa, her tail draped across the cushions like a golden river. "Morning," she said, stretching lazily. I noticed something different. There was a quiet playfulness in her demeanor, less mischievous, more inviting. It was as if she was ready to let me into her world a little deeper. We spent the day doing small tasks together, cooking, cleaning, and even reorganizing parts of the apartment in ways that made absolutely no logical sense. And yet, it worked. Each shared moment, each laugh over spilled cereal or scattered papers, made the apartment feel less like a shared space and more like a shared life. Then came her big test, or at least I thought it was. She had set up a small blanket fort in the living room, a maze of cushions, lamps, and chairs. "If you can navigate my rules, you might finally understand me," she said, her ears twitching in anticipation. I hesitated, then dove in, crawling and climbing through her little world of playful chaos. Every turn brought laughter, minor mishaps, and moments of unexpected teamwork. By the end, I realized something crucial. She wasn't trying to annoy me or dominate the space. She was teaching me that life didn't have to be rigid, that rules could bend, and that freedom sometimes meant embracing the unexpected. and in return I was learning to let go of control, to laugh at mistakes, and to find joy in unpredictability. As night fell, we sat side by side on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. Her golden ears twitched in the gentle breeze, and I felt a warmth in the quiet moment we shared. "You're different from what I expected," I said. She looked at me, a small smile playing on her lips. "And you're more fun than I imagined," she replied. It was then that I understood. The bond we were forming wasn't just about living together. It was about connection, trust, and the magic of discovering someone who challenged you while still making life brighter. My Foxgirl roommate wasn't just a rule breaker. She was a teacher, a companion, and somehow, a mirror showing me a side of myself I hadn't seen before. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I realized the apartment no longer felt small or ordinary. It felt alive, filled with laughter, surprises, and an energy that only she could bring. And I knew, without a doubt, that this unlikely roommate was going to change my life in ways I had never imagined, and I couldn't wait for every moment of it.